All right, everybody. That is recording artist Chris Carr from Fort Dodge, Iowa. That is all self-produced. Chris is a multi-instrumentalist, independent musician who has made his life's work off of music. So hats off to Chris Carr for that great music. Has yet to be actually released digitally. It's never been released digitally. We've got a whole lot of stuff going on at TUNZ Records. I am Kenny, and you are not. And we're going to talk tonight about digital marketing strategies. But before we do, we're going to introduce my co-host. I would say he is Sean McKenna of the podcast Barstools and Bandtalk. Rim Shots with Sean. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing great. How are you?
I am doing, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um, so just before we start in the news, Aerosmith announced a 40-day U.S. tour to begin in September. Uh, it will unlikely include Joey Kramer, who announced that he's going to spend more time with his family. So the Aerosmith camp, they can never quite get it together.
well, you know what? That's typical. Michael's there waiting in the wings. We're going to do a couple of things here. We are going to talk about this photograph here. You put it up on your.
Oh yes.
What was your purpose in posting it? I caught something different from it, but
That was their very first gig. They opened for Y&T. And Y&T was sort of established and Motley Crue wasn't. And I guess the moral of the story is Motley Crue goes on to international stardom, and Y&T is still amazing and does great, but never quite got to the level that Motley Crue did in terms of fame and fortune and whatever. So that was their
right.
very first gig.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting when I look at that. I can see like I'm looking at the midriff picture of Vince Neil, and that to me, I mean, you got to remember what I did for like 40 years. I was a registered nurse, right? So, I looked after people in ill health. So that was just what I did, and so you notice things about people, and that midriff photograph to me is very telling of a guy that's going to have a weight gain issue later in life.
Well,
Right?
so if I'm hanging out with you, I'm going to suck my gut in all the time.
I don't know. I have no idea, but that's just what it is. We got a guest waiting in the wings, and I want to talk about Michael a little bit because he has a tremendous career in a world of digital marketing. Way back from the days when the internet was in its infancy, Michael was forging a career in the world of digital marketing. From working with up-and-coming independent artists of all genres to overseeing online marketing for major acts like Kiss, Britney Spears, and Dream Theater, Michael Brandvold's impact on the modern industry is without question. Well, you know what? We're going to talk about that tonight. And without further ado, here he is. There's Michael. How you doing, buddy?
Great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Awesome to have you aboard tonight. You, sir, I told you it was an honor to have you with us. Because of what your career means to the music industry, especially the direction that the music industry has gone in the digital world.
Yeah, I mean, the new music industry is all digital. I mean, people will still, oh, it's all I only buy CDs. I love my vinyl. It's like, that's great, but that's not the meat and potatoes of the music business anymore. It's not even downloading MP3s anymore. It's all streaming. It's all streaming and it's all video.
I will have to say too, Michael has one of my favorite podcasts, Three Sides of the Coin, and any Kiss fan will know that that's a little bit of a play on words from a song. Look what just arrived for me this week, Michael.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah, and anybody that's a Kiss fan will know that can be a lightning rod of discussion as well. But so jumping right in at your podcast, you when you were on last with me, you had a gentleman on who I think was an assistant engineer, and he had talked about somebody that might have made a guest appearance on Kiss Alive, and that's since I guess been debunked. Has that gone any further? Or I saw some stuff that maybe Paul had sent you a note that said it wasn't true, or
I mean, we had an assistant engineer who worked at Electric Lady Studios during the 70s. He worked on Dress to Kill. He worked on Kiss Alive. He worked on Frampton Comes Alive. He's worked on a lot of big albums, like major albums. And in passing, he had just mentioned, oh yeah, and Bob Kulick played some guitars on Kiss Alive. And as Kiss fans, we were like, what? That's news to us. We as in the Kiss fans have known that Bob Kulick has been, the ghost musician in the Kiss world for a long time, starting with Kiss Alive 2 and moving onward from there. But we had never heard that Bob Kulick played some guitars on Kiss Alive. And the engineer basically said, listen, it wasn't like he played an entire song. It wasn't like he even did a solo. It was literally like one or two notes, like a quick drop in that needed to be fixed. He goes, you couldn't, if you were to sit down and listen today with that in mind, you would not be able to tell where it was.
So we're talking about minor overdubs here.
Yeah, very minor. I mean, literally like a note, two notes. That was it. And the engineer said, listen, back in the mid 70s, Bob Kulick was a regular at Electric Lady Studios, meaning he was there all the time, and he was the go-to person that the studio would use for stuff like this. So it was not uncommon at all. And when he told us this, we were like, are you sure you're not confusing this Kiss Alive 2? Because Bob Kulick played the guitars on side 4 of Kiss Alive 2, the new material. And he was like emphatic. He's like, no, this was Kiss Alive. I did not work on Kiss Alive 2. I couldn't have confused them. I didn't work on that album. And we knew as soon as he said this, the minds of Kiss fans were going to be going like, holy crap, this is something we didn't know. What I didn't realize is the amount of Kiss fans that were like, lack of a better term, pissed at us.
You guys get lit up.
We got lit up because the engineer said this. Yeah. And, and our attitude was basically, listen, I mean, the engineer was there. We can't doubt this guy. We questioned him. We pushed him hard that, are you sure? Are you sure? And he was sure.
Okay.
And then not even a week later, Paul Stanley reached out to one of the co-hosts on the show, Mark Cicchini, and was like, hey, I'm just telling you, Bob was not on Kiss Alive. It was all me and Ace that were there. Mark was like, well, can we go back on the show and tell everybody that you said this? And he's like, you can tell them everything I said. So, Paul came out and disputed the claim. Now, honestly, in my mind, these are the only two people that, other than Bob, who, rest in peace, has passed away, the only two that you can really pay attention to. I could care less what, thousands of fans have to say about it, because fans weren't there. You've got an engineer who was there, and you've got Paul Stanley that were there.
Here's the long and short of that from my perspective. I mean, as a fan, I mean, I was listening to Wicked Lester back when they were Wicked Lester. And I had a friend that lived in Detroit. So I had the pipeline to all the really good music that was coming, that was being played at Cobo Hall. A lot of the big bands were playing at Cobo Hall. And I remember he said to me, hey, did you know what? Kiss is coming. This is like 1974. They're coming to London, Ontario, to the old London Arena, which was like a 2,500 seat old wooden arena that was used for roller skating and whatever else, right? 1974, we saw them live. There was no security. There was no security up front at the stage. And I remember the end of the night, right? We're laying on the floor with our feet up against the stage. I'm looking up at Gene Simmons and he's spitting blood on me. And we're listening to rock and roll all night and party every day. And confetti's pouring on us. And I can remember we smoked a couple of joints or so. And we're like, man, this is so fucking cool.
I mean, I still to this day, I don't know why so many fans got so, hurt. That I'll use that as the polite term. How come they got so hurt by this little bit of minutia being revealed? Because as we ended the interview, it's like, it doesn't change how great Kiss Alive is.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't change anything about Kiss Alive. Frankly, before we went live here, we were all talking about how we all know Kiss Alive isn't a live album to begin with. The drums are the only thing that were live from the original recording. Everything else on Kiss Alive was done in the studio. Vocals, guitars, bass.
Oh, you know what?
The crowd noise.
So while you're saying that, Michael, I think what it might be. So I was geeking out one day and I found this internet page and it was the drummers.
Hang on a second, guys. Hang on a second. I think I just lost Michael's signal altogether.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's weird.
You can hear.
I can hear you guys. I can see you guys.
You can hear me, but okay.
So we'll
something weird. Something weird going on.
Anyway, the drummers of Kiss, and when I started reading it, it was like, I figured they're talking about, Peter and Eric, but they were talking about Kevin Valentine, and they were talking about Alan Gratzenberger that played on Gene's solo album. Come to find out that he did a lot of overdubs for Eric Carr and Kevin Valentine.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, I'm like, my God, my hero didn't play on it. I think that's what it is with people, right?
Well, it is to some extent, but I don't know, and maybe it's because I'm too deep into the world of Kiss and have been too deep for way too long. None of that surprises me because, and frankly, this isn't unique to Kiss.
Right.
Well,
session musicians and ghost musicians are extremely common all the time. So I wasn't turned off. I was just like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool to learn that. It doesn't mean the song sucks now. Doesn't mean the album is no longer a great album because that was somebody different playing on it. It's like, I don't get it. Why, I don't know. Is it like the Wizard of Oz where all of a sudden they pull the curtain back and, it's not what you were expecting? If that offends somebody, I can get it and I feel for you, but it's not a big deal in this world anymore.
I think
I got to update everybody here for a second. Okay, we are talking to Michael Brandvold, who is a digital marketing specialist who we're going to be getting into that story about the whole Kiss Online thing and how that came about as a result of Michael's brainchild. And we are going to get into that tonight. So I want to let people know who's on the line tonight because it's a great show to have on Michael to talk about this because digital marketing is becoming such a big part of the music industry. We talked about that at the top of the show, and you're talking about that even again in terms of how you market a band when there's controversy around them.
Well, so let me start. I always tell people jokingly, I went to the KISS School of Marketing. That's where I studied marketing, was the KISS School of Marketing. And, if you're any bit of a KISS fan, KISS has never shied away from any publicity. They've always had that saying, any press is good press. Love me or hate me, just keep talking about me. Whatever, there's a million things. The secret to success is to offend the greatest number of people. So my attitude has always been, no, controversy is not a bad thing. it's got to be legit. You know, what I, as a marketing person, will tell artists all the time is, everything is transparent now online. So if you're just making up a fake controversy, people are going to eventually discover it was all fake, and they're going to read through it, and you're going to be ripped to shreds because it was all made up. Which is the same as, don't align yourself with a charity just because you think it's good for PR. Align yourself with a charity because it's important to you, and don't worry about what that charity does to somebody else, meaning whether it offends them or not. You've got to be completely honest in what you do these days with the internet. You know, and you know, when on my podcast, that's our attitude, is like, you can love us or hate us, but we're always going to give you our honest opinion. This is what we think. We're not saying something to make you happy. We're not saying something to make a band happy. We're saying this because this is what we think. And you can light us up if you don't agree with it, but let's be clear here. When it comes to music, everything is nothing more than just a personal opinion.
Right.
There are no rules about what makes good or bad music. It's what your ear likes at the end of the day. And what my ear likes is different than each of you guys, what you like. And just, you know, be true to your opinion, be true to your feelings, and don't back down just because somebody else doesn't like it.
Right.
And
you see that?
Go ahead.
You see that logo next to Sean there?
Yeah.
So that's where my record company was founded, upon those principles. It was about those principles of transparency. And I was watching all these guys on the internet out there, you know, trying to sign bands, these record labels, so-called record labels, trying to sign bands. And they're out there like just doing this hard sell thing constantly, right? Oh, we're going to get you famous. We're going to make you money. We're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, they're snake oil salesmen, right? They're not telling you the truth. They're not going to tell you there's 60,000 songs published every day on Spotify alone.
Right.
They're not going to tell you that. And they're not going to tell you that your music is now in a huge, huge pool. You might be great in your own hometown. Remember the Helix actually wrote a song called Jesus Wasn't Loved in His Hometown.
That was a fact.
And it was a fact. And so here's the whole thing, right? When you talk about that whole business of, you know, you may be liked in your hometown, but it doesn't necessarily going to be that you're going to be liked everywhere.
No, and honestly, I mean, you shouldn't be doing this to try and get everybody to like you, because that's impossible. It is literally impossible. Now, and this applies to a podcast, this applies to a book author, this applies to a band. You cannot create with the intention of making everybody like what you create. You know, overthinking, like, okay, well, if I write about this and I have the guitar solo sound like this, more people will like it. No, because guess what? There's an equal amount of people that are going to hate it. So at the end of the day, and you know, this has been the attitude of our podcast, but I tell clients this: you as the artist, the creator of whatever's being created, you're the only one that matters, that you like it. At the end of the day, that's it. You are the one that for the rest of your life is going to have to live with that piece of art having your name on it. As a marketer of bands, my name isn't going to be associated to an album for the rest of my life. You know, I might be a footnote in that album, marketing by. It's not my name and picture on the cover. So if you create, here's the example: Music from the Elder by Kiss. That is a perfect example. That was an album that Kiss created with the intention of writing an album that will prove to the critics they are a critically acclaimed, smart band. Well, the second they did that, what did they do? They created an album that the fans didn't like.
Mhm.
Now, great. Okay. Before anybody says anything, yeah, there are fans that love it. But let's be honest. When that album was released, it didn't even go gold. That was a huge hit for Kiss. They couldn't sell 500,000 copies of that album. They couldn't even tour the US. It was such a bomb. So there's an example of an artist who purposely tried to create art to make people like them. And what it did was it turned off more people because they didn't like it. And then you've got and if you listen to interviews with Gene and Paul, they'll both say, it's not our best work. We're not proud of that album. We don't, they'll play a song here or there occasionally to make the fans happy. That's not what they put on their resume saying, check this out. The best Kiss album is The Elder. No, that's Destroyer in their mind. That's Kiss Alive. That's Rock and Roll Over. So don't even, as an artist of any sort of art, don't waste any time trying to second guess, overthink, and figure out what will make people happy, because you will just piss off the same amount of people when you change what you're doing.
It's interesting though, Michael. Just quickly on that. So I vaguely remember. I mean, I was very young when that album came out, and I was just excited because Eric Carr played on it. I was a huge Eric Carr fan. If you think about when Vince Neil leaves Motley Crue and they're doing the presser for that, and oh my God, Vince was terrible and John Corabi's the best. This is the best album we've ever done. And then it flops, and then years later, Nicky's like, yeah, well, it was a terrible album. So it's kind of like they forget what they put out there at the initial, beginning of when they're doing the pressers. Then all of a sudden their legacy is maybe it's it's a crap stain in their legacy if that's what they think, and they kind of shift gears. When you're marketing these, I mean, just like this, I guess, trying to delve into their legacy and help them with their online presence, helping them prepare for things like that.
To some extent, but not really a lot. I mean, again, I think most artists that have been around 40, 50 years now understand how things have changed and understand that you got to be transparent and you got to be honest now. It's not like the record industry of the 60s, 70s, and 80s when you can make up the story that you want to be associated with, and nobody's going to be able to question it, research it, dig into it. I mean, come on, we grew up as kids, Kiss. The story of Gene Simmons had a cow tongue. Gene Simmons was spitting his own blood. Ace Frehley's from another planet. When you're 12 years old, you don't know any better. You believe it all. But where were you going to go to disprove any of that anyway? You weren't.
Right.
Now anybody says anything, it can be researched in the blink of an eye through multiple sources, and multiple people who have inside knowledge will jump in and contribute to it. So more and more artists actually understand. It's just, you just got to be honest. You got, back to your point, it's like, maybe you don't compare every album you record to your best album, because that's just, again, I'll just keep using Kiss as an example. Stop saying that every Kiss album is Destroyer all over again. It's not Destroyer, and we know you can't do Destroyer ever again, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just tell us what you really, and yes, you're not going to come out in interviews and say, well, this new album, it's the worst album we've ever recorded.
Fair enough.
Nobody's going to ever say that, but also don't hype it to the point where you're saying it's better than your best album ever done. Let the fans be the ones to say that.
Yeah, I think when you try to do something out there that you try to make people like you, it's kind of like that whole business of being validated by the number of likes you receive. Social media. Yeah. I mean, I'll here's an example. I mean, but you're saying you're saying don't look to other people for your validation. No, you. It's always good if they like it. Listen, as a podcaster for over a decade,
I'd be lying if I don't love when I get great comments and support and feedback for episodes, and that we get great numbers for listening. I love it, but I don't change anything I'm doing if that doesn't happen. I've always said, and I'm only speaking for myself as a little creator of podcasts, we're only going to do this podcast as long as we keep having fun doing this podcast every single week. When it's no longer fun, I'm not doing it. I'm going to stop doing it. So that's, at the end of the day, you want to do it for yourself. And yes, you want to get validation. And yes, you can listen to what people are saying. But it would be foolish, in my opinion, to sit here and go, well, a bunch of fans said we could have a better episode if we changed this, this, and this.
Why
would I do that? Why?
I just add a little fun enhancer to this thing. That's all.
Well, so back to I guess over to the digital marketing piece now, Michael. So, I mean, you work with KISS, you work with other artists. In terms of your process, I don't expect you to give up, the Colonel's 11 herbs and spices, but how active are artists in terms of directly active versus their people working with you to try to come up with, the concept and the creativity and the end result of what they're looking to do?
It's different for every single artist. Some artists, like KISS, Gene and Paul, were actively involved in everything. Mm-hmm. It wasn't me going through an assistant to Gene and Gene coming back through an assistant. It wasn't going through a manager. It was me communicating directly with Gene and Paul and getting, I'd come into the office and there'd be a fax from Gene, or there might be an email from Paul. I mean, they themselves were directly interested, involved. Other artists don't want that involvement. And I can respect that. As a marketer, I think the more an artist is involved is better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as a marketer of a band, I can't pretend to be the artist.
Yep.
Meaning I'm not going to pose as them online and pretend I'm talking as them online. The words have to come from the artist. They can't come from me. So the artist has to have some involvement in there. The artist, I can give an artist all sorts of content ideas and directions. I want video clips of you talking about the stories behind every song on the new album. The artist has to do it.
Yeah.
I can't record the video telling a story about a song. It's not my song. I didn't record it. It has a different meaning to me because I listened to it than the person who actually was inspired to write and record it.
Right.
So the artist has to be involved. And when they're not involved, it makes it much more difficult. And honestly, if an artist isn't involved, it probably shortens the window that an album release is going to have for getting attention. Because there's only so much you can do if an artist doesn't want to be part of it.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah. They have to at least say, okay, you tell us what you want and we'll have somebody create it for you and send it to you. Let me know what you need me to write. They have to do that. Once they give me that content, I can do a lot with it. I can slice it and dice it and spit it out over time and put it into different platforms. But they have to create it. They have to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of points here I just wanted to make. So,
sure.
You're talking about the artist involvement and doing the work with them. There's the other piece of that I want to talk about too is how you got the attention of the likes of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. I mean, you did something out there that grabbed their attention. That was something that pulled you into this industry, was it not?
Yeah, it was. And probably one of the most common questions people will ask me is, how do I get into the music business? I want to do what you're doing. How do I get there? And honestly, and I look at this as it's the same as it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. You just got to start doing something probably for free because you love doing it, and hope that it catches somebody's attention. Now that could be, hey, I wanna be a sound person. Okay, well, go find some local unknown band and volunteer to mix the sound for them, because God knows they'll probably appreciate it. You could do lights for them for free. You could help them just unpack their van or their station wagon. That's how you start.
Okay, we got a question
from there.
We got a question there, Michael. This is a question from Katie Valancourt. Thanks for joining us tonight, Katie. Michael, do you ever think it's better to come out with an album before ever playing a gig, or play to a crowd first?
You can. I don't think it's better or worse either way. What I will say is, it's much tougher to have a career if you're not going to play gigs. And there's plenty of artists that don't want to play live, can't play live, whatever. Two guys in the band can do it live, but the other two have steady jobs and they can't leave. No matter what's changed in the music industry, playing live still is incredibly important.
Thankfully,
as important as it was again. 50 plus years ago, it's still very important. That's where fans connect with you. That's where you're going to sell the most merchandise at a live gig. You're going to go back to your table and you're going to sell CDs and T-shirts, and you're going to get people to join an email list. If you don't do those, if you don't play live, it's one of those things that will shorten the window of an album release, because there's just less opportunities. Now, you could go record an album, get that album done, and then play your first live show. That's fine. You could play, and get as tight as possible. I mean, many bands use playing live as rehearsals. That's where they work out their songs. Because if you are fortunate enough to be able to go into a studio to record, you pay by the hour that you're in that studio. And the smart thing is not to walk into a studio and go, okay, now let's write our songs. Why would you want to be writing and rewriting and reworking songs for God knows what a studio could charge you, $100+ an hour? Why would you do it there? Do it somewhere else where it's free.
Right.
Work it out in a show.
Here's an interesting concept, Michael. We have, I'm part of a group of guys that gets together to record music. And we record everything live off the floor in my studio. And when we rehearse, we record every session. And then we sit back after that session and listen back to everything we recorded. Yeah, we critique it. And our fine-tuning for our arrangements comes from listening to it back. I learned that from Hendrix, who used to take a tape recorder everywhere that he went.
Well, that's it. Again, the olden days. This is when you used to only be able to record in a studio. Pre-production for an album was often done somewhere else. They literally would go sit in a warehouse with the producer maybe, but you're going into this cheap rehearsal room, somewhere cheap, and you would spend 2 months in pre-production.
Okay, so this
going over your songs.
This comes from Red D Films. He says $2 per minute for studio time in Toronto. $2 per minute.
Yeah. Yep. So you're talking $120 an hour. And that's cheap. I'm sure that's cheap. I mean, if you wanted to go into a name studio, it could cost you considerably more than that. And also keep in mind, you're not just paying for the studio time, you're paying for the engineer's time, you're paying the producer's time, you're paying everything else. That's why, you know, back in the 80s when money was being thrown around all the time, band would get $1 million recording budget and they'd go in the studio and they'd spend 3 months in the studio and they'd use up that entire recording budget before they even recorded the album. And then they need more money. That's how you don't make money in the music industry.
Yep.
Here's a cool thing. A friend of mine that I met online, his name is the studio is called Rio Grande Studios, and it's run by Ken Riley. And he produces for a lot of independent artists. They have a full-on, huge, state-of-the-art mixing studio in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he even has a bed and breakfast that the artist can stay at there. And his rates are reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. And he works, he supports independent artists, but he makes his living doing mainstream work for big major record labels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, in this day and age, you can record an album on an iPad using GarageBand.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't think that means you're not professional, because there's a lot of professionals who basically do their recording at home because you can record at home now. I mean, that's part of what's changed in the music industry is recording studios are not as abundant as they used to be. And
no,
they're competing against the fact that you could bring your amp into your bedroom and go direct into GarageBand and you can record right there.
I'm just going to adjust some lights here, guys. Hang on a second.
So it's interesting.
Keep talking.
It's interesting, Michael, because in my neck of the woods, some guys will, they'll record and then they'll bring in somebody that they think might be a name, and they're paying the person who might be the name to play on it, and then they drop the name. But I mean, if you don't have good songs, it doesn't matter who's playing what. If something doesn't catch somebody's ear.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I tell this to every single client. The song still matters. Now, the song is not enough, but the song has to be great.
This is where we hang out and record, guys.
Nice.
It's awesome.
This is a full-fledged on studio with two Scarlett 18i20s. We record everything live off the floor, so everything is mic'd and recorded into my DAW. We can even broadcast live, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you should do all of your pre-production and arrangements and get all of the bugs out, work out the songs, work out everything.
Right.
Somewhere where it's basically next to nothing cost-wise to do that. But, Sean, back to what you were saying, the song has to be great. As a marketing person, I'm assuming when you come to me and hire me, your songs are the best you could have done.
Right.
I understand there can still be constraints. You only had so much money, so much time, so many whatever, but they've got to be the best songs you could possibly do at the time, that you didn't cut corners just to cut corners. Because once you've got a great song, that's not enough. That's where the marketing comes in. Because a great song that is never heard, is it really a great song?
No, that's a fair question. That's a fair question.
I mean, if the only people that ever hear your song are your parents and your boyfriend or your girlfriend, is it a great song? You can sit there and go, it's the best song I ever wrote, but guess what? The rest of the world never heard it, never knew it. But songs that clearly were not that great are getting a lot of attention because they're doing can I swear?
Absolutely.
Sure, go ahead.
They do a shit ton of marketing for a subpar song.
Right.
And that will infuriate musicians to no end. Why is that person getting all the attention? Well, here's a perfect example, and I won't name names. I had a friend who was in a metal band probably 10 years ago, and they came to me and they said, "Listen, Mike, listen to this new album. We spent $20,000 recording this at a great studio. Now that it's done, what can we do to get some attention for it?" And I go, "Well, how much marketing budget do you have?" "None, because we spent all of the money
Right.
on the studio." I'm like, you should have spent $10,000 on the studio and put the other $10,000 into marketing and promotion, because now this great album is just never going to get heard because you can't spend any money to market and promote it. And listen, that means you actually have to have real money. I've had people come to me, it's like, "I got $300. Can you do a release campaign?" I'm like, $300, I'll give you a couple phone call consultations. You're not going to have a marketing release strategy for $300. It's just not going to. You got to have real money.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And now you're talking about real money. Are you talking about that specifically in the world of the mainstream music world?
Well, listen, if you're a pop artist, real money means shit ton of real money.
Right.
Because that's where you're competing against record labels with deep pockets that will spend a lot of money.
Right.
In the rock world, it's completely different than it was in the 80s and 90s and even the beginning of the 2000s. I mean, there's no radio anymore.
Right.
Video is YouTube. So money can be less, but you're still gonna realistically want a budget at a bare minimum of like $5,000.
What if it wasn't for the artist a competition, but just a matter of trying to develop organic growth, and they didn't have a lot of money to spend, and they're looking for means and ways of getting that done. I mean, that's largely how my record label operates. We operate on this artist centric model that the artists don't pay me anything to do what we do for them, and everything I earn is off the backside of their digital earnings, and that money goes to continue to do what we do in terms of marketing and getting artist music out there, getting it properly published and recognized in the places it can be recognized, and always vying for opportunities for more playlists, always vying opportunities for those sync licenses, those ever precious sync licenses, because those can become really good bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I kind of get a feel from, especially when it's an independent artist, is how critical is it to actually make money with this new release?
Right.
Because if they say, "Well, I gotta make money," my honest answer is, you're probably not. I mean, selling music is next to impossible. To actually get a person to pay you money for some music in this day and age, whether we agree with it, like it, or what, it doesn't matter. You've got to accept this is the reality.
Yeah.
Fans don't pay for music. So, can we use your music to do other things? And I've always had a running joke, bands are nothing more than t-shirt factories.
Mm-hmm.
It's
true.
So record some music, but use that music to sell some new t-shirts, some hats, sell tickets to a show. You use that. The music now is not the commodity being sold anymore. The music is now a part of your marketing tool chest, that you're using the music to market something else. Merchandise, shows. You're giving away your music to get an email address from your fans, so you can email them multiple times other things to sell. You gotta, it's surprising to me how many artists still show up thinking, yeah, I'm going to sell this new CD. I'm like, no, you're not.
Mm.
Unless you got a tour, like more than a 3-date tour, but a 6-week tour, you're not going to sell music.
Yeah, up here in Canada, we call it swag.
Yeah,
And
swag.
yeah, and you go and that's another way of supporting the artist. I mean, it's unfortunate that it doesn't all happen off the music, but here's the interesting thing. I think without exception, every artist that's come on our label has come on with the understanding that, you know what, I know this is not going to make me rich. They come with a low expectation. They don't have an expectation of making money. They're like, you know what, we tried. A lot of them have already tried this on the DIY side of it, and
it's tough. It's incredibly tough. It can be demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a call with a prospective client earlier today where I was like, your first album isn't going to make any money. Look at your first release as setting up your second release, and your second release sets up your third release. And what I mean by that is give away that first album in hopes of building an email list and getting YouTube subscribers. And you got to build an audience that you can talk to with that first release. So when that second release comes, now you can tell 2,000 people who are in your audience, you've got a new release. You might sell 1 or 2 copies of something in that audience. That's more than you did the last time. But that second one is setting up for the third one. And that's the way you've got to look at this. Is it's always setting up for the next release. If you're coming out with that first album and the honest truth is you're brand new, nobody's heard of you, nobody knows of you. And I'm not saying this, I'm assuming your music is great. Why is anybody going to buy it?
Yeah,
why would anybody buy it?
It's a great comment. So those of you that know Helix know that they're still touring, playing a lot of live shows. We're actually releasing some new music this year, some never released digital music of Helix that was never released even during the Capitol years that I'm aware of. And we are going to, be doing a lot of stuff with their music over the next little while. Helix does quite well with the merch at every show. Brian has more than 30 items for sale. Right?
That's the way it's got to be. I mean, again, let's go back to this band called Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
There's a band that, their income, let's be honest, has come from merchandising. And I worked for the band's merchandising company. When I worked with them doing the website, I worked with their merchandising company.
Look at Sean bought into corporate America. Gene Simmons owns your brain.
Well, yeah. And this is a very small piece of the pot. I like to think that I helped pay for Nick and Sophie's college education.
100%. I mean, you cannot as an artist be afraid of merchandising.
Sean, if you were female, you'd have to be fear Gene Simmons.
I'd have to what? Well,
you'd have to fear him because look at all the merch you buy, man.
Yeah, but you know what? So here's the thing, and this is a question that I would have for Michael, and I don't expect Michael to answer like exactly, but obviously it's well known that Paul and Gene are pretty. They know what they want and whatever. Was it? Because I've got to know you a little bit. You're a straight shooter, and I also know that you're probably not a fanboy. You would go in and you do the job that you were hired to do. For guys like that, when you're putting together their online presence, was there a period where you had to really reel them in, or did they pretty much know what they wanted, or how did that work?
Well, I started with them in '98, so the internet had only been around for about 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, like 56.
I mean, Amazon didn't exist, Yahoo didn't exist. Google didn't exist. No social media existed. YouTube didn't even exist. So keep in mind, when I started with them, the internet was just a fad at that point in time. It hadn't really proven itself. A lot of people, including myself, saw the potential, but the internet, and in my case with KISS, their website was a product.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody came to KISS and said, I want to license the rights to build the KISS website. It wasn't Gene and Paul saying we're spending our own money. It was a third-party company that said, we're going to spend our money to build a KISS website, and we've got this revenue model. And if anybody remembers way back when KISS Online first launched, it was a membership ISP.
Yep.
That's right. It was an
you
ISP.
paid, I can't remember, it was like $20 a month. And remember, this was before broadband internet existed anywhere. The only way you could get on the internet back in like 98 was you would call a local phone number on your modem and connect through AOL, through Microsoft, through somebody. A local internet provider gave you a phone number, and you called this number, and the phone would squeal and scream, and those tones that kids today don't even understand what they are. But that's how you got on the internet. KISS Online started out as that. We were a branded internet service provider that for $20 a month, you can get on the internet through us, and we're going to create a membership website for you as a fan, giving you all this cool stuff. That's how it started. Now, I quickly, within about the first year, realized that there's a lot more business to be had if we got rid of the paid internet access to the website and made the website open and free to everybody. But we sold merchandise online.
That's right.
You go to KISS Online, you now have access to the official KISS Online store, which for the first time, you could buy tour merchandise through this store if you couldn't go to a concert.
Now,
you get your t-shirts, your tour books, your hats. And the sales of merchandise far surpassed the money that was being made as an ISP.
Okay, so aside from all of this other stuff going on, I also understand that you are a master of HTML.
I used to be. I haven't coded in HTML in years, but
right.
let me tell you. I mean, that's how I got started in all of this. Back in 1995.
I love
95. This. Remember, this is literally the dark ages of the internet. My full-time gig was a network manager for the advertising department of a home improvement chain. So my job was to stay up on technology. And I was reading articles of like, oh, there's this new programming language, HTML, that's coming out, and it's connecting computers on the internet. And I thought this was pretty freaking interesting. So I was going to teach myself how to program in HTML. Now, back in 1995, there was not a single book on how to build a website. There wasn't a single application that helped you build a website.
Right.
You built a website by going to somebody else's website, and they were very simple back in those days. And you went to your browser and you selected something called View Source. And all of a sudden, the browser turned into a text file of all sorts of code that was used to create that web page. So you copied the code from that website, took it out, changed it, modified it to do what you want to do, upload it to your server, and now all of a sudden, you've got a website. Now, often that website is nothing more than one page and a bunch of text and maybe a couple graphics. But that's how you learned how to do HTML. Was you had to write it by hand. You had to look at code that other people did. Like, how did that person make that website, make the menu do this? How did they change the color? You go in and look at their code and go, I see how that happened. And
how did you learn how to interpret code?
well, the honest truth is HTML back then was pretty easy. Now, I had studied computers prior to this, so I knew how to program in BASIC. I'd programmed in Fortran and COBOL and Pascal, so I understood computer languages. So I could look at this and go, okay, I see what this means, and I understand what's going on here. And it wasn't it was a very, very simple language back then. Now HTML today is incredibly complicated.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't go to the restream.io website and say view source and take all the code for what you're looking at right now. That's not possible. It's just not possible anymore.
It's infinite, though. It's infinite, and we got about 2.5 minutes at the top of the hour, so we got to wind down. That's a story for another time, though, because HTML code was the beginning of the way things were on the net.
It was, again, the dark ages. When I built my fan website on KISS and launched it, I think it was like May of 1995. It was the 5th website on the entire internet about KISS.
99 bottles of beer on the wall. Remember that?
I was the 5th website. So, the internet was incredibly small back then.
And it was
small.
And it was slow.
It was incredibly slow. I mean, you were using modems that were 14.4, 56K, which probably doesn't mean anything to people, but basically your cell phone has faster internet access
than
our computers had.
When we get offline, I have a funny story to tell you before you go. Michael, it's been a pleasure having you tonight. Expert marketer, digital marketer, strategist, Michael Brandvold from San Francisco, California. Thanks for joining us tonight, man.
It's a pleasure. And, I'm happy to come back anytime and continue sharing stories, because I know we could talk for 6 hours here uninterrupted easily.
Right. So let's call this the Michael Brandvold unfolding story. How's that?
The series.
A series to be continued on the Indie Show. We're going to have Michael back with us. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. It's just been a pleasure having everybody. Sean, how's the weather out there on the East Coast?
Fantastic. It's great. We had it won't mean anything to Michael unless he, has to get the Celsius to Fahrenheit calendar, but we were about 16 Celsius today, so that was pretty good.
God, we had terrific weather here. We had weather in the 80s in the early part of April. I was out motorcycling. I've been out 3 times this year. Crazy. That doesn't happen in Canada very often, Michael.
Well, listen, I grew up in Minnesota, so
yeah, we're down in single digits this week. Listen, guys, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. Thanks again. I am Kenny from the Indie Show. These guys are not. That is Sean. That is Michael Brandvold. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody, and we'll be out in just a few seconds. So maintain that happy smile.